Blog Talk Radio.
On this special edition of Sports Drive Live, can the Red Sox win the AL East with a new skipper and avenge last season's September collapse? Who will win the Rookies of the Year? And can the Marlins bring their past success to Miami? All that and more coming up on Baseball Night in America next. Good evening, sports. Baseball Night in America on March 2012 MLB. As always, I'm all about listen. All that's number 649. Next 21 number go. Let's get started. You're gone and baseball is back.
I'm really excited for this season to start. I mean, it just feels like that the Yankees just ended their season against Detroit Tigers, and it just seems like David Freese hit that home run in Game 6, and here we are again. Baseball season is about to start. If not, it's already started in Japan.
Yeah, absolutely, and this show is all about our predictions for this season. It's going to be a very exciting one, and without wasting much time, let's jump right into it. We'll go alphabetical order here, and starting in the American League and the American League East, and we'll start with the Baltimore Orioles.
Baltimore Orioles, managed by Buck Showalter in his second full season, and the Orioles, their starting lineup looks very similar to the one that beat the Red Sox in Game 162. The only difference is Wilson Betemit is going to be the designated hitter replacing Luke Scott, who went to the Tampa Bay Rays. Wei Ying Chen is going to be the ace of the staff. He pitched the last 5 seasons for the Chunichi Dragons. Jake Arrieta, Brian Mattis, Tommy Hunter, and Jason Hamill, who they got from the Colorado Rockies, round out the rotation. And I still look at this team as probably finishing last in the American League East. They play hard every year, but I just don't feel that they have enough to match the Yankees, the Toronto Blue Jays, the Red Sox, or Tampa Bay in that division. I just think at times that they'll be overmatched, but they play hard for Buck Showalter, but they don't really have a lot of depth off the bench or that much in the bullpen.
Yeah, it's my thoughts exactly. The Orioles, you kind of like to root for them. It was great to see. They actually had a great September. The Red Sox had a polar opposite of that, but the Orioles did contribute to their collapse. And the Orioles, they have some interesting parts. Adam Jones is an all-star candidate. I think past couple seasons. J.J. Hardy, a very great, one of the best offensive shortstops power-wise.
He had 30 home runs last year, J.J. Hardy.
Yeah, exactly. That Japanese import, Wei Yin Chang, we have to see how he'll do. They have a lot of interesting pieces. Competing in the division like the American League East, they would need they need a lot more to really be a contender. If they were in in another division, maybe like the AL Central or maybe even in the other league, the National League, their fortune could change. But right now, it's more about the 4 teams ahead of them, and the Orioles, I do have them finishing last place.
The injuries that the Orioles do have this year, they're missing Brian Roberts. He's suffering from concussion syndrome. Placed in the 15-day disabled is Zach Britton on the same day, placed in the DL for shoulder inflammation. So if they get those 2 pieces back, maybe they can make a run at the Toronto Blue Jays, but I just don't see them finishing ahead of 5th place because the American League East is probably the most competitive division in baseball.
Yeah, I agree completely, and all respect in the world to their organization. Buck Showalter, a great baseball guy, great manager. He's the right guy for this job of bringing the Orioles back. Of course, they have the new GM and Dan Duquette, former Red Sox general manager. So, this is more going to be another kind of baby step season. Maybe they can try to stay around 500 most of the year, but the competition is too steep in the American League this year for the Orioles, in my opinion, to make a run at the playoffs. So I have them finishing in last place, as I said.
I don't see the Orioles finishing out of 5th place. You mentioned about Dan Duquette taking over as the general manager of the ball club. Last time he was general manager of a ball club was 2002 with the Boston Red Sox, but even before that he's had a long track record. For those that remember that he was the general manager with the Montreal Expos, built that team up until he left to take the Red Sox job. That was back right before the '94 strike. And so he is a good baseball mind. He's worked very well with rebuilding teams, and he is the right fit in Baltimore. Just the question is, how is he going to fare dealing with those four teams in the American League East? We keep talking about it, but I just don't see the Orioles climbing out of the basement. And now let's move on to another team that's had an interesting season. That's the team that Dan Duquette came from back in 2002, the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, the Boston Red Sox, of course, now managed by Bobby Valentine, the former Mets manager, also with Ben Cherington taking over the reins at GM after Theo Epstein went to the Cubs to be their president. Red Sox, of course, coming off that horrible September collapse, one of, if not the worst in Major League Baseball history. This was a lot more of a retooling year than spending year, unlike last year. Red Sox tried to patch up the holes that led to their collapse last year. They moved Daniel Bard to the rotation. They made a couple trades to bolster the back end of their rotation bullpen in trading for Andrew Bailey to be their new closer and the former Yankee Mark Melancon to be their new setup guy. Jonathan Papelbon, of course, went to the Phillies. We'll get to them in a little bit. But the Red Sox, they do have a lot of those key players coming back from the team that was supposed to make a deep run in the playoffs last year. However, it just doesn't seem to me that their pitching, is consistent enough, nor is their bottom half of their lineup.
Well, the Red Sox, they made a number of changes as we discussed. It's going from the old guard to the new guard. Terry Francona's out. Tim Wakefield and Jason Varitek retired. It's a completely different ball club now. J.D. Drew is gone, but you still have a lot of that tension in the clubhouse. Even with Bobby Valentine taking over, now he's the new sheriff in town. It's going to be his way or the highway. And if you were listening to any of the radio stations or reading this week, Kurt Schilling was talking to WEEI Radio in Boston and was saying they were speaking to his old teammates, and they were already complaining about Bobby Valentine. And when you still have that dissension and that discontent in the clubhouse, and Beckett's still trying to figure out who's the snitch who ratted him out and ratted the ball club out about the beer and fried chicken and all these distractions, how can you focus on the play on the field? And just a dark cloud that hangs over the Red Sox. Bobby Valentine's trying to deflect that criticism by talking about other ball clubs and like the Yankees and trying to take the pressure off of his players, but that's always going to follow them until they make the postseason this year. And it's just a very unsettled situation in Boston right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But the way I look at it is also you can't really discount. They still have a ton of talent. There's no doubt. Adrian Gonzalez, one of the best first basemen in baseball. Tremendous year last year. Jacoby Ellsbury. Those two were both in the running for MVP. Dustin Pedroia, John Lester can rebound. So can Josh Beckett. But there are a lot of holes, as I like to point out. I don't like to point out. I feel bad for Boston's situation right now, being an unbiased fan. Carl Crawford is out to start the season. Cody Ross will be the left fielder for the majority of April and probably into May. The right fielder will be Ryan Sweeney. As you said, J.D. Drew is still a free agent, might be forced into retirement. The shortstop's Mike Aviles made that surprising trade to trade Marco Scudero to the Rockies. So, I mean, there are a lot of question marks, especially with their bullpen besides Chavez. I mean, Bailey and Melancon both haven't pitched in big markets. Melancon had that small sample in New York and really wasn't that great either. They tried to do kind of what the Yankees did in 2011, which is bring in a couple of veterans. Decided Vicente Padilla to be their long man out of the rotation. Maybe he'll eventually take over the starter spot if Felix Doubront doesn't work out. And they also have guys like Aaron Cook, who's in the minors, who can eventually come back and try to help the Red Sox team. And I think there'll be big players at the trade deadline for a guy like Johan Santana or any other big-name pitcher who might be on the market. But the Red Sox, in my opinion, I don't think this year they have enough talent to keep up with the Yankees or keep up with the other contending teams in the American League. You look at it, their rotation is really not that scary considering Bard has never started, Doubront, and Buchholz, Beckett, and Lester all coming off of horrible Septembers or, haven't even pitched. Buchholz missed had been out since June.
Well, my concern for the Red Sox is the back end of the rotation. I think the front three of the rotation will be solid with Beckett, Lester, and Buchholz. They're veterans. They know how to get it done. But Daniel Bard, he's had an ERA over 7 in spring training. That's one of the areas of discontent with the Red Sox. Ben Cherington, general manager, wants Daniel Bard in the rotation, while Bobby Valentine would like to have him in the bullpen. Also, Bobby Valentine wanted to have Jose Iglesias be the starting shortstop for them, and instead it's Mike Aviles. But you look at the back end of the rotation, it's Daniel Bard, then Felix Dubron, who's had a good spring training, left-hander. You mentioned about Aaron Cook. I think that he would be good and better fit than Daniel Bard in the rotation because he's a sinker baller, keeps the ball in the yard. Plus, we also got to factor in that Daisuke Matsuzaka will be returning from Tommy John surgery in June. And also the question is, how will these pieces fit? You mentioned about Cody Ross in left field. He's never played in the American League before. He's more of a power guy. He's mostly going to be a part-time player. Ryan Sweeney, that came over from the Oakland A's. We talked about Andrew Bailey, that he's been injured. He's pitching now in the American League East, has not had a lot of success against them early in his career. And I think the guy that's going to be key for the Red Sox is the guy you haven't talked about, is going to be the catcher Ryan LaVarnway. I think he could come up and have a Buster Posey-type impact if he comes up in late May, early June, around the same time that Daisuke Matsuzaka had. We saw what he did in Game 161, good bat. Right now he's in the minor leagues at Pawtucket working on his defense. And I think if he comes up, he could be that bat to fill the void left when they lost Marco Scutaro and they lost other key parts in their lineup.
Yeah, and LaVarnway, I forgot to mention that certainly he can be a big major player. Jared Saltalamacchia did have a decent season last year, but I've heard from a lot of reports, in Boston radio, as you said, that they are expecting LaVarnway to come up and be kind of the Buster Posey of the Boston Red Sox. LaVarnway is a very interesting player, and this is really going to be if the Red Sox want to make the playoffs, this will need to be a team effort. This can't be one guy, this can't be two guys, and this can't be constantly, disliking Bobby Valentine or unapproving of the Red Sox changes, because what is done, and the Red Sox really need to focus on this season. They can't keep going back to last year, because we've seen what's happened, teams like the Mets, who look back at their collapses or don't recover from them. You look at them now, and I'm not saying the Red Sox are going to go down the same exact path, but this might be the last season to really contend seriously with this type of core.
Yeah, well, with the Red Sox right now, it's just there's so many different personalities clashing in the clubhouse. It doesn't seem like there's one universal method to how to turn this thing around, and everybody has their own idea, their own agenda, and you can't have that in a baseball clubhouse. And to still talk about what happened last year, I mean, this is a new season right now, and so much change is in the air. I just can't see how the Red Sox are going to bounce back unless they get unless they're all on the same page. It just doesn't seem like that's going to happen, in my opinion. I have them right now finishing third. I think if Ryan LaVarnway comes up, they could really become maybe the second wild card in the American League. I think that they can make a run at it, but as of right now, things look bleak in Boston.
Yeah, I think things certainly do, and it's unfortunate because it is, of course, the 100th anniversary of Fenway Park. I don't want to get too much into that, but it was supposed to be a historic season. This was supposed to be a great historic couple of years for the Red Sox, and right now I do have them finishing third as well. I do not have them making the playoffs. I just don't see it with this team. I mean, even though I'm a Yankee fan, realistically, I don't see it with the back end of the rotation. Of course, the clashing personalities in the clubhouse, questionable people in the bullpen, especially with the back end. I just don't see it for the Boston Red Sox this year. And I think we've basically summed up the Red Sox situation right there. Yeah. And let's move on to our team. We're going to give them an unbiased take, of course, because that would not be cool if we didn't. Let's move on to the New York Yankees.
Well, the 27-time world champions, they did more of retooling than making a lot of moves. The biggest move that they did make was they traded Jesus Montero to the Seattle Mariners to get Michael Pineda. Michael Pineda last night left his start against the Philadelphia Phillies with shoulder inflammation. He will begin the season on the 15th. They disable this. Yankees rotation right now is set with CC Sabathia, Hiroki Kuroda, who they also brought in from the offseason from the Dodgers for $10 million. Phil Hughes is going to be back as number 3 starter. Ivan Nova should be number 4, and Freddie Garcia as the 5th starter. Yankees lineup remains intact. They did sign Raul Ibanez to replace Jesus Montero. And right now I look at the Yankees and I think that I don't want to sound biased, but I think that right now they're the most complete team in the American League East.
I would have to agree. I mean, all credit to the Texas Rangers. Of course, what they've done the last 2 years, defending American League champions. But, the Yankees, I mean, they have made some questionable moves now, considering that Pineda is now on the disabled list, and considering they signed Kuroda for all that money, and then they bring Andy Pettitte back to basically pitch for about half a season. Technically, he could come back in May. I'm not sure how realistic that date sounds. But the Yankees, I mean, they have a much improved rotation. There is no doubt about that, with or without Pineda and Pettitte. And to think that the team last year won 97 games from, and most of those wins, 40% of those wins came from guys like Freddie Garcia and Bartolo Colon, having proven veterans like Hiroki Kuroda and Sabathia, and then rookies or, talented young arms and Hughes and Nova, I think will be a good balance pitching-wise, and you really can't discount the offense. I mean, come on, the Yankees, I'm sorry about bias right now, but they do have one of the best lineups in baseball. I still question the Ibanez signing. They should have gone after a guy like Johnny Damon or even Hideki Matsui. Ibanez is starting to get accustomed to playing for the Yankees and picking up his bat speed. But overall, the Yankees having Cano in the middle of that lineup, arguably the best complete hitter in baseball. The Yankees, they look very good. And I would not be surprised if they win the division.
One thing that could slow down the Yankees, the only weakness I see is age. Alex Rodriguez is going to be 37 years old, and during midseason, Mark Teixeira is over 30. Nick Swisher's in his mid-30s. Raul Ibanez, we mentioned, is getting older, and I think that the move for Ibanez is more of a clubhouse move. Raul Ibanez was a great clubhouse guy in Philadelphia and Seattle, one of the classiest guys in the game. And Martin's getting up there in age. Derek Jeter, of course, the captain, is now going to be 38 years old. You have age also on the bench. I think that's one thing that could slow down the Yankees' age. They still have a rock-solid bullpen led by the 42-year-old closer Mariano Rivera. So you got age all around. So if any of these guys go down, the Yankees could be in trouble in that situation, especially, as we mentioned, with all the talent in the American League East.
Yeah, that is true. It kind of, in a way, is a ticking time bomb, in my opinion. I mean, you think about it, if CC were to go down for any long period of time, if a guy like A-Rod or Cano, whatever, go down. Of course, Cano's been very consistent. A-Rod hasn't, of course, past couple of years. The Yankees will need to stay healthy, and I think, but they have enough flexibility to do that. In having guys like Eduardo Nunez, Eric Chavez, and Andrew Jones, they can give guys like Swisher a day off. They can give Teixeira a day off or days off, make them the DH, and slot in, whether it be Chavez at first or even Swisher at first, or Yankees, they can give Jeter and A-Rod days off when they need it, and I think the Yankees know that they need to do that now with their advanced ages, and I think if you do give them the right amount of time off, they certainly can still produce and be somewhat of the all-star players they once were.
Well, the Yankees had to rely on Curtis Granderson and Robinson Cano more than they expected last year because Alex Rodriguez and Mark Teixeira and Derek Jeter all missed time due to injuries. That could be a concern that you're relying just on two players like that. That's why it's important that you have to rotate the guys, as you said. Give Andrew Jones a start every once in a while. Have Nunez play third base and have A-Rod DH. You have to get that mix in there. And with the pitching staff the Yankees have, even with the injury of Michael Pineda, you still have Andy Pettitte coming back. Plus, Freddie Garcia's pitched well in spring training, as well as everybody in the rotation, with the exception of Nova. The Yankees should be fine. It's just the only thing I see stopping them from getting to where they need to be is age and injuries, and that could affect any ball club. And that's the only thing I see. And right now, my prediction for the Yankees would be first place in the American League East.
I would certainly have to agree with you. I'm a Yankee fan, but I really do think the Yankees team is very complete, as you said. They have a deep enough pitching staff for if one of those guys were to go down. Pineda already is down. They have a deep enough rotation. They have a bunch of guys. The clubhouse is meshing, which is something Red Sox aren't doing right now. Their offense is no doubt one of the best in baseball. They'll be up there again in all the offensive categories. Their bench is solid and has postseason experience, veterans like Chavez and Jones. And then their bullpen ever improving with David Robertson, Mariano Rivera, and Rafael Soriano, who could bounce back. The Yankees have a lot of interesting pieces. And as I said, this team won 97 games last year from starts by 38 and 39-year-olds off the scrap heap with talented young pitchers now in their rotation. I only see, barring anything catastrophic, I can only see the Yankees at least making the playoffs. I have them finishing first as well.
Yankees also have young pitchers coming up in the system, DJ Mitchell, Dellin Betances, Manny Buenuelos, and they could fill in a pinch if anybody gets injured, and it's more realistic to expect them to probably come up in 2013. Plus, they could also help in the bullpen in case anybody goes down there as well.
Yeah, that's true. And the Yankees, I think we both agree are one of, if not the best team in the American League, maybe in baseball. We'll have to see how it plays out, but we both agree the Yankees should be making the playoffs this year and should be winning the American League East. So now let's move on to a team that finished right behind them last year, and I think we both agree will do it again in the Tampa Bay Rays, who defeated the Red Sox last year or at least in the wild card standings. What an incredible night that was, Game 162. The Tampa Bay Rays, of course, managed by Joe Madden, had an incredible year last year, or at least an incredible streak in September. Have a lot of those pieces coming back, added a lot of power in Carlos Pena returning to the Rays after playing for the Cubs last season. Luke Scott signing on to be their DH. Jose Molina will be their new catcher, and in the rotation, they now have Matt Moore for a full season. Jeremy Hellickson, we know what we can expect from him. David Price, and then, of course, topping it all off is James Shields, who had 11 complete games in the Major Leagues last season.
Best starting rotation, I believe, in baseball. Shields, Price, Hellickson, Moore, Neiman. They've now moved Wade Davis, who was one of their top starters, into the bullpen. That just shows you how much depth the Rays have. I'm looking at the starting lineup, giving it a second look, and you see that there's a lot of new faces there. Carlos Pena was with the Tampa Bay Rays a couple of years ago. He's back for a second tour of duty. Luke Scott was a former Baltimore Oriole. He's in the lineup. Jeff Keppinger, they got from the Houston Astros, he's going to start the season as the starting second baseman with Zobrist in right field because B.J. Upton is right now on the disabled list with back soreness. Jose Molina, I think, is really going to be a big help in containing the running game, and I think the pitchers are going to love throwing him. I remember with the Yankees in 2009 that when the Yankees won the World Series, many of the pitchers loved to throw to Jose Molina, albeit he was the backup catcher. And the Rays bullpen, I think that the back end of the bullpen, the 8th and 9th innings, could be a cause for concern. Fernando Rodney and Kyle Farnsworth have been consistently inconsistent throughout their careers. Farnsworth had a great year, but how is he going to do under pressure? He's really not made it past the first round of the playoffs in his career, with the exception of 2003 with the Chicago Cubs. Burke Badenhop gives them some depth, as well as Jake McGee, guys that could go along, and also Wade Davis. That will help in this bullpen. The Rays, if it wasn't for the Yankees, I would pick them to finish first in the American League East. I think they're going to finish second, but in the playoffs, all bets are off.
Absolutely, and it's funny. I kind of feel it's kind of funny, in my opinion, when people like to second-guess the Rays, and we both are. But the Rays last year, they lost Rafael Soriano and I think not Joel Peralta.
Lost the whole bullpen last year.
Yeah, exactly. Joaquin Benoit, I'm just thinking of, and yet they still had an incredible bullpen last year. The Rays, they really are a great team, and in any other division, they would be year in, year out contending for the division title, which they really have been in the American League East the past couple seasons. But the Rays, as you said, in my opinion, I think this is probably, I agree with you, probably the best rotation in baseball, 1 through 5. Their lineup is adding a lot more power, and Carlos Pena coming back and adding adding Luke Scott, excuse me. But, the Rays, they really are an interesting team.
They also have Desmond Jennings for a full season this year. In the middle of the season last year.
Yeah, you can't forget that either. Evan Longoria really picked it up in September and is a completely different hitter when the Rays are winning, so they're hoping for a lot more of that this year. I agree, too. The Rays, I think they'll finish second with the second wild card. And, as you said, in the playoffs, all bets are off. And anyone who's doubting this team again, just think of last year. And, I think the Rays will be in pretty good position come September to return to the playoffs again.
Or ask any Red Sox fan. I mean, remember the Tampa Bay Rays have owned the Red Sox over the last 3 or 4 years. Carlos Pena, I think, is going to be a great fit for the Tampa Bay Rays. Remember that he was tied to the American League lead with Mark Teixeira in home runs in 2009. Did not really fit well with the Chicago Cubs last year. He's going to come back to a familiar environment, to a manager that he respects and is beloved by, and I think that he's going to add another dimension to that lineup, because I remember that a lot of people were saying that the Rays do not have a lot of offense and firepower, and they were even saying that with a lot of predictions that I've been hearing for 2012, but for some reason I guess they forget that they added Carlos Pena and Luke Scott, both guys that are capable of hitting 30 home runs. They get on base. They do exactly what they're supposed to do. Jeff Keppinger I really look at as an underrated player, even if he's going to be a part-time player, because he basically hits for average and he gets on base, and that's the key. You've got to have guys in the lineup that are going to get on base, have a high on-base percentage, and don't take the Rays lightly. I know they only have a $61 million payroll, but this is a fine young team. I think they're going to finish in second place this year, and I think they're going to make some noise in the postseason, and they're going to be ready to go, and we're going to be ready to go to move on to the final team in the American League East that we haven't gone through yet, and that is the team north of the border in Toronto, the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, the Toronto Blue Jays, managed by John Farrell, of course, underwent a tremendous change last season, I guess you could say, uniform-wise and team roster-wise. Of course, reverting back to the classic uniforms of the early 90s and their championship success. But they also added a lot of pieces since opening day last year. Yunel Escobar is the new shortstop. Kelly Johnson came over midseason in a trade with the Diamondbacks. You're going to have Eric Thames for a full season. Colby Rasmus came over from the Cardinals. Right in the middle of that lineup, of course, is Jose Bautista. Their rotation has a lot of young arms, but very talented in that. And Ricky Romero, Brett Cecil, Kyle Drabeck. They really are a great team. I mean, not a great team, but a solid team that I think will give teams like the Red Sox and Rays, who are ahead of them, make them sweat a little bit. I like the Jays. I can't give them a division title or the playoffs because of the talent in the American League, but the Blue Jays aren't that far off. They have a very young team that in a couple of years can eventually overtake the aging teams of the Yankees and the Red Sox.
The Toronto Blue Jays, I think, are going to finish over 500 in 2012. Now, I don't like the idea of throwing around the word great, because to me, greatness is teams that win championships and do it for a long period of time. But I think Toronto is a solid ball club, probably middle of the pack in baseball. If they weren't in the American League East, I think they would probably be competing for the wild card spot. I like the rotation. Ricky Romero, I think, is one of the most underrated pitchers in the game of baseball. Great left-hander. Brandon Morrow, you have as a number 2 starter in that rotation from the former Seattle Mariner. Brett Cecil had 15 wins a couple of years ago. He's going to try to bounce back. He has to show some consistency. One good year, one bad year with him. Henderson Alvarez was a 21-year-old that came up in the end of September. If you remember, he beat the Boston Red Sox at the end of the year, but who didn't? Kyle Drabeck had a tough season in his rookie year. The bullpen is a bunch of. They have a bunch of veterans in there. Jason Frazier is back in Toronto after he was traded to the Chicago White Sox. Sergio Santos is the former White Sox closer in the rotation in the bullpen. I'm sorry. Francisco Cordero they have. So they have experience. They got veterans there. Eric Thames, you mentioned, is in left field. Colby Rasmus they picked up from the St. Louis Cardinals at the end of last year. Kelly Johnson they have in there. So they have the veterans. And a guy that I'm going to watch out for is Brett Lawrie. Brett Lawrie was tearing up AAA Las Vegas last year, and he came out strong last year for the Blue Jays. During the last 2 months of the season, hit almost 300 for them. Plus, they have guys that they've been waiting for, like Travis Snyder, and they also have in the minor leagues Travis d'Arnaud. And I really like the Toronto Blue Jays, what they're trying to build for the future here now with Alex A. as the general manager and John Farrell as their skipper.
Yeah, Toronto is really set up, in my opinion. I mean, as I said, the Red Sox and the Yankees are aging. I'm not saying they're not going to be good in a couple of years, but the Blue Jays, their window for winning is more in the next couple of seasons than this immediate season. As you said, Brett Lawrie, J. Pierre Ancibia, who I also watch out for. Of course, he's hitting probably going to hit around 9th in the order this year, but he can definitely move up. There's just a lot of great young. Well, not great. I can't use the great. They aren't great.
I think I used great accidentally when I was mentioning about Ricky Romero, but I think for a guy like him, he is one of the great left-handers that we have in the American League as far as starting pitchers, or in top 3 at least.
I agree completely. And the Blue Jays, I have them finishing 4th to basically round out the predictions. I have them finishing 4th. The Blue Jays, as I said, they can win, make a run for the playoffs in the next couple of seasons. But this year, there's just too much talent in the American League, specifically the East, and that'll basically end my predictions to the American League East. I have the Yankees in 1st, Rays 2nd with their second wild card, Red Sox 3rd, Blue Jays 4th, and the Baltimore Orioles in last place.
I think I agree with you with all of them. I think I have the Yankees 1st, Tampa 2nd, the Red Sox as my 2nd wild card, Rays with the 1st wild card, Blue Jays 4th, and the Orioles 5th. So basically I gave away who my 2 wild cards are. So in the Central and West, the division winners are basically going to decide who's going to make the postseason, in my opinion. As we move on now to the American League Central and the Chicago White Sox, managed by Robin Ventura.
Yeah, the White Sox, also a team undergoing some change last year. Big change. Of course, Ozzie Guillen now no longer their manager. The boisterous Hispanic manager has gone on to the Miami Marlins. And Robin Ventura, the former player, is coming in. Very young manager, as are a couple new skippers this year. The White Sox really underperformed last year. They were supposed to have a big year. They signed Adam Dunn to a big contract, re-signed Paul Konerko. They were supposed to compete. They were in a lot of people's picks for the AL Central division. Ultimately, it didn't pan out, and the White Sox basically have undergone a lot of changes. Not a lot of changes, but I guess minimal changes. They're not trying to compete this year. It seems like Alejandro De Aza is their new starting center fielder. AJ Przinsky's coming back. Rios, Konerko, Dunn, Alexi Ramirez. In the rotation, you got John Danks, Jake Peavy. Danks was the talk of trade rumors last offseason. The White Sox, no one is really going to compete with the Tigers this year. But the White Sox, in my opinion, they aren't a team near contending right now. They are going to have to rebuild, in my opinion, to get back to the top.
Well, Kenny Williams, the general manager of the White Sox, after years of basically trying to spend money, hoping to have an instant winner, is going back to the drawing board, trying to add some young players into this ball club. And this year is probably a year where they're just going to pack it up, hope in 2013 that they're going to be able to compete. They still have some older players, some mainstays that have been there a long time. AJ Przinsky and Paul Konerko have been there since the World Championship season in 2005. That's 7 years ago. Gordon Beckham's one of the young guys that they have now. Dion Viciedo they're trying to get. He's supposed to be the starting left fielder replacing Carlos Quentin, who went to the Padres. They're hoping that Brett Morrow gets on track. He was supposed to last year. Didn't work out for him. They added Kosuke Fukudome from the Chicago Cubs. The starting rotation, Jake Peavy, I think, is a bit overrated. He's been injured a few times. John Danks, we mentioned, got locked up for a long-term deal. Gavin Floyd is a solid number 3 starter. Chris Sale was actually their closer last year, their setup guy last year. And he's actually supposed to be in the rotation this year. It's going to be interesting to see how he can make that transition. And Philip Humber, who had a strong season, will be the number 5 starter. Their bullpen's going to feature 3 rookies in there, Addison Reed, Nathan Jones, and Hector Santiago. And I just don't feel this team is going to be competing this year. I feel that they're going to be a 5th-place team in the American League Central. That might shock a few people. I think Robin Ventura, we're unsure how he's going to do as a Major League manager, has no experience managing in the minor leagues. And I just think that the White Sox are just blowing it up and starting fresh right now.
Yeah, I think that's probably their plan, too. 5th place is a bit shocking to me, honestly. I have them finishing 4th. I'll give you the team who's finishing 5th, in my opinion, a little bit. But the White Sox, as you said, they are an aging team. A lot of those key players from the 2005 championship are still kind of lingering around or have moved on. The White Sox, and it is surprising because I remember last year I didn't pick them for the Central, but I thought they'd be right there at the end. It just didn't pan out, and the White Sox, as you said, are going to look to rebuild. I think they'll hover around 500 a little bit, but ultimately I don't see them competing. I don't think even for a wild card spot. This is the Tigers division, and they are far off from competing with anyone who is going to be in contention for the wild card. I have them finishing fourth, probably around 80 wins, I'd guess.
And I just don't see the White Sox competing. They still have a lot of veterans on the ball club, but I think they're going to have trouble scoring runs with Alejandro Diaz and A.J. Przinsky 1-2 in that lineup. I just don't see how they could generate offense there. They still have many question marks. I don't think they have a lot of depth off the bench. And right now it's tribe time. Let's talk about the Cleveland Indians. Cleveland Indians will be missing Grady Sizemore. He's going to be on the disabled list 8 to 12 weeks due to back surgery. They will also not have Fausto Carmona because he was arrested for identity fraud in the Dominican Republic. His real name is actually Roberto Hernandez Heredia, which I don't think is that big of a loss for the Cleveland Indians because Carmona has underperformed ever since his 19-win season back in 2007.
Yeah, and the Indians, I like them in the division to. I don't like them in the division, but I like them to compete in the division. I think they have a lot of solid young players. Michael Brantley, Asdrubal Cabrera is evolving into one of the better shortstops in the American League. Carlos Santana is one of the best catchers, I think, offensively right now. Travis Hafner, if he can stay healthy, can still rake. Casey Kochman had an incredible year with the Rays last year, batted over 300. In the rotation, they have Justin Masterson, Ubaldo Jimenez, traded for Derek Lowe, which was one of the first moves of the offseason for any team. They have a lot of key pieces that can provide production this year and in the future. The Indians, of course, being stuck in this division, they really don't have a good chance to make the playoffs. But I think they'll have a great. I gotta stop using great. A good year this year, considering their situation and the American League competition. They have a solid bullpen, and it is tribe time in Cleveland. At least that's the only team that's really doing anything right now. Good luck to the Indians in 2012. But I really think they'll have a decent season.
Well, I'm going to try to be careful and not say great when I make my statement right now. But the Cleveland Indians, they're getting back Shin-Soo Choo. He missed most of the season last year due to an injury. Travis Hafner, they hope Proc will get back on track. Casey Kochman, I think, is a really good signing. He had a career year with the Tampa Bay Rays at over 300. Shelley Duncan, it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to hold the fort down in left field. And they have Jason Kipnis, who came on strong at the end of last year. The rotation I like, actually. Justin Masterson keeps the ball down. He's one of the best ground ball pitchers in baseball. I think he's going to be really solid leading the staff. You have Ubaldo Jimenez. It's going to be interesting to see how Ubaldo Jimenez is going to be able to adjust after coming over from Colorado last year. He came over in mid-season last year, struggled a little bit. I think he'll do better. Josh Tomlin, I think, is one of the most underrated pitchers in the American League. Another guy like Masterson keeps the ball down. Derek Lowe's the same way. So you got a lot of sinker ballers here. So the infield has to be on their toes to get to the ground balls. And I think they're going to keep the ball in the yard. They're going to pitch to contact, which is going to be good. The bullpen is pretty much all back. They got the veteran Dan Wheeler in that bullpen along now with Rafael Perez, Joe Smith, Tony Sipp, Vinny Pistano, and Chris Perez is the closer. And I like the Indians to finish second. I think that they're going to be competitive. They might win about 80 to 85 games. And I think they should have a good team this year. The question is, will it be enough to compete for that second wild card? You never know, because right now so many teams could compete for that second wild card now that it's added. But I think the Cleveland Indians will have a good enough season, in my opinion. Let's move on to a team that knocked out the Yankees last year and almost knocked out the Texas Rangers in the postseason, and that's the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, and the Detroit Tigers, of course, had a big season last season and a arguably a bigger off season, managed by Jim Leland. The Tigers, of course, with the MVP and Cy Young, Justin Verlander, no doubt one of, if not the best pitcher in baseball. He's an incredible pitcher, and it was tough watching him pitch against the Yankees. Though the Yankees did have more success than any team would have during the playoffs against him. I think they scored 4 runs against him in Game 3. But let's look at their lineup. Have really solid lineup. Austin Jackson leading it off. You got Miguel Cabrera moving to third base now because Prince Fielder is coming on to be their new first baseman. The injury to Victor Martinez made them jump on Fielder, make him sign with his dad's former team. Delman Young came over from the Twins mid-season and was big in the playoffs. Alex Avila is one of the better offensive catchers in baseball, had a very solid season last year before breaking down in September. Johnny Peralta, another great offensive shortstop.
Again, great, Vano. You got to stop using the word great.
I don't know what's wrong with me tonight, but he's a good offensive shortstop. Their bench is solid with Brendan Inge, Ramon Santiago, Don Kelly, Gerald Laird. Their rotation is very young and very talented. As I said, Verlander, you got Scherzer, Doug Fister, who had like an ERA under 2 since coming over to the Tigers last season, Rick Porcello. And then the number 5 spot is apparently going to go to Dwayne Bilo, the left-hander who has had, I think, minimal, if at all, Major League success, or at least appearances.
There are many points that I have to disagree with you. First, that you mentioned that Johnny Peralta is a great shortstop. I mean, isn't there a shortstop in your own city that you root for that could be considered a great shortstop in Derek Jeter? but more seriously, Austin Jackson in the leadoff spot, I'm not for him batting in the leadoff spot. And Jackson strikes out way too much for a leadoff hitter, and about 400, 500 at-bats, he'll strike out about 130 or 150 times. That's going to cost you a ton of runs at the top of the lineup, and you don't want to do that when you have Brennan Bosch, Miguel Cabrera, and Prince Fielder as your top 3 hitters. I think Brennan Bosch is really going to do well as the number 2 hitter in that lineup. He's going to see a lot of pitches that are not going to be thrown to Cabrera and Fielder, and he could really blossom and have a breakout season. The bench, I don't like the bench. Gerald Laird and Brandon Inge are basically a waste of space. They don't hit well. They don't do much of anything. Ramon Santiago is decent and Don Kelly, but other than that, I'm not thrilled with the bench. And the starting rotation, Verlander, Scherzer, Fister, Porcello, solid all around, should be good. The bullpen comes back right intact as they were last year. And Johnny Peralta, I think, will struggle this year. I think he had a career year last year. I think he's going to drop down a bit, and so will Alex Avila. Even with all those shortcomings with the Tigers, I still think that they're going to finish first in the American League East. I mean, Cabrera, Fielder, and Bosch, that 2, 3, and 4 spots might be the most dangerous in all of the American League, if not in all of baseball.
Yeah, I have to agree, and I mean, you made some good points. The bench is not as solid as I kind of made it out to be. I'm overestimating a lot of things tonight, but seriously, as you said, Austin Jackson is not an ideal leadoff hitter. He strikes out way too much. Alex Avila, Justin Verlander, it's going to be hard to replicate their amazing seasons. But of course, Miguel Cabrera, Prince Fielder, Delman Young, the other young starters in the rotation, they're going to pick up the slack. If any, I'm not saying Verlander and Avila will decline tremendously. They're still solid players. But and their bullpen too is still very, very good with Daniel Schlereth, Phil Koch, Joaquin Benoit, and of course rounding it out, Jose Valverde, who was perfect for save opportunities in 2011. They are a very solid team, and I mean, I think you'd have to be crazy not to pick them first in the American League Central.
I think you would have to be basically on drugs or something if you're not picking them first in the American League Central. I think Austin Jackson is the leadoff hitter by default to the Detroit Tigers. They have to probably find the better option. It's more suitable probably for Jackson to be batting in about 6th or lower in that lineup, but they really don't have another true option that get on base or be able to have speed at the top of the lineup. The Reds have a similar issue with Drew Stubbs. We'll get to them later on, but at least with the Reds, they did move Drew Stubbs out of leadoff spot. But getting back to the Tigers, Justin Verlander, probably the best pitcher in all of baseball right now. He won the MVP, Cy Young. Doug Fister, I think, has really found a home here in Detroit. And that top 4 of the rotation is really good. The number 5 starter you mentioned, it could go to Dwayne Bilo. Another guy, watch out, Drew Smiley, another left-hander, number 3 prospect in all of Baseball America. They also have Jacob Turner. You got to watch out for him. He might be the best of that pack. Andrew Oliver, Adam Wilk. All those guys could help out as a 5th starter. Maybe they might add somebody else by July 31st. But the Tigers right now, first in the American League Central, and let's move on to a team that made some changes this year, the Kansas City Royals. Good young team, could potentially be good. They added Jonathan Sanchez from the San Francisco Giants, traded for him after they had Melky Cabrera last year, and they lost Salvador Perez for half the season. There's a surgery to repair a torn meniscus. He's going to be out for about 3 months. And they also lost their all-star closer, Joaquim Soria, with Tommy John surgery. And it's going to be a different look for the Kansas City Royals. I actually had them a little bit higher. Now I have to put them a little bit lower in my picks because of some of those injuries. But I look at this team and I think that they could surprise a few people despite some of their shortcomings.
Yeah, this is the case with a lot of teams. I mean, they have interesting pieces. I can't give them a really competition, for a playoff spot. They could make some noise. I think they'll stay around 500, but they have Alex Gordon, Eric Hosmer, who had a tremendous rookie season last year, Billy Butler, very talented DH. Jeff Francoeur, who still can produce somewhat. In the starting rotation, Bruce Chen, veteran righty, Luke Hochevar, Jonathan Sanchez coming over from the Giants, as you said, one of the better left-handers in the game. Excuse me, Chen is a left-hander, by the way. Luis Mendoza, Danny Duffy rounding out the rotation, and their bullpen isn't horrible. Jose Mahara is coming over from the Twins, Aaron Crow, Greg Holland going to be setting up, and then closing, of course, now with Soria out, will be the former Los Angeles Dodger, Jonathan Broxton.
Well, Aaron Crow is actually competing for a rotation spot, but the Royals felt that it would be better to keep him in the bullpen. I wonder if the Red Sox will do that with Daniel Bard. But looking at the Royals, Tim Collins was good out of the bullpen. The rotation I'm not that high on. I'm wondering maybe when Mike Montgomery comes back and maybe when they get Felipe Polino and they get some innings, I don't know how they're going to get 200 innings out of any starter in here, with the exception of Bruce Chen. And I think that might be a problem. I have them pegged for 4th in the American League Central, and I like the lineup. Alex Gordon he won the Gold Glove in left field, really made a great transition going. Oh, I used great, sorry, but he did play a great left field last year. He made the transition from third base to left field. You have Lorenzo Cain, who came over in the Zach Greinke deal. They're going to try to put him in center field after they trade away Melky Cabrera, who had a career year, 18 home runs, 87 RBIs last year, looked really strong. Hosmer, Butler, Mustaskis, we talked about it. Jeff Francoeur. But the bottom half of the lineup is you got to wonder how they're going to do anything with that and the bench. Humberto Quintero and Brian Pena are your catchers. That's not a great sign. Quintero is a good receiver. He was a decent receiver with the Astros, but he can't hit. Pena could hit, but Pena could hit a bit, but he's not a great receiver. Jason Bourgeois came over from Houston. Yuniesky Betancourt is probably one of the worst shortstops in the game. Alcides Escobar is going to be your starting shortstop. He hasn't proven himself yet. And I'm just not that sure about the Kansas City Royals finishing higher than 4th.
Yeah, well, actually, I have them finishing 3rd. And by no means am I saying they're going to be great. I'm not saying they're going to be great. The Royals, they're one of those teams kind of stuck in the middle. They have some young pieces and they have some older pieces, trying to get that right fit. But the Royals really, they could look to trade guys like Billy Butler or Alex Gordon if the right deal presents itself, trying to get maybe some prospects because it was great to see that the Royals and the Indians were at the top of the AL Central. Once around May 1st came last year. The Royals, they're a very interesting team to watch. I definitely won't discount them. I'd look out for them to make a little bit of noise in the AL Central, but ultimately I have them finishing 3rd, and so that basically reveals my top 4 teams, and finishing 5th I have is the normally contending Minnesota Twins.
I actually have the Twins finishing 3rd, believe it or not. That's weird. I have them a little bit higher. But the Minnesota Twins, last year they actually spent the most time on the disabled list, more than any other ball club in baseball. They had injuries to Joe Mauer, Justin Morneau. This year it looks like Justin Morneau is actually going to be a designated hitter for the Minnesota Twins. Chris Parmelee, who came up at the end of the season, will probably be playing first base. Danny Valencia was the only regular who was not injured last year. They got Ryan Doman over from the Pittsburgh Pirates to replace Jason Kubel. They lost Kubel and they lost Michael Kadire. I think that's one of the reasons why many people are picking the Minnesota Twins to finish in fifth. Right now, it seems like that Ben Revere will probably be coming off the bench for them, but I could actually see Ben Revere probably being in the starting lineup for the Minnesota Twins. I think the reason why he's coming off the bench now is they want Morneau as the DH to stay in their lineup. They also picked up Jamie Carroll from the Los Angeles Dodgers. Jamie Carroll is an underrated infielder. He could help, gets on base, and is a good fit. The rotation, Jason Marquis should be in their rotation. They got Pavano, Lariano, Liam Hendricks, who is one of their top prospects. He's going to be in the rotation, and Nick Blackburn. Hopefully they're going to try to get Scott Baker back. He has elbow inflammation, will be on the disabled list. The bullpen was a who's who last year, and the bullpen really has not changed that much, one of the worst in baseball last year. But they do have guys that can give them length in Dunsing, Anthony Swarzak, and Alex Burnett. I have them finishing third because I think the rotation is better than advertised. They have veterans on this team, and I like their chances a little bit better than Kansas City.
Well, honestly, the Twins, I really think it'll be a three-team race for number 5 in the division. I think the Royals, White Sox, and Twins will all have similar records within a couple games of each other. The Twins, in my opinion, though, I don't know how you can count on them. As you said, their bullpen is one of the worst in baseball. I mean, when you're starting rotation, when your number 1 pitcher is Carl Pavano, something isn't going right. Pavano,
Pavano was solid 2 years ago for the Minnesota Twins, though, and Pavano and Lariano, it's not horrible 1-2. That's why I have them finishing the third.
That's true. Lariano was not consistent at all last year. Pavano did give them innings again, but was not a solid top of the rotation type of pitcher. Liam Hendricks, it's hard to really project what he'll do. I mean, we've seen there's kind of been a medium in baseball of rookie pitchers excelling and then rookie pitchers failing. So we'll have to see how that turns out. Nick Blackburn, but with their lineup too. I mean, I don't know how you can count on Joe Mauer catching most of the games. I don't think he will anyway. But Justin Morneau, I mean, Joe Mauer, it seems like, Joe Mauer hasn't played a full season, Justin Morneau hasn't played a full season in about 3 seasons. So, I mean, they brought in Josh Willingham, they brought in Ryan Doman, good deals I like. But honestly, I don't see it with the Twins. They need pitching. They don't have pitching in their bullpen or rotation. Bench, very young, very unproven. And I can't see them doing much this year. All respect in the world to Ron Gardenhire, one of the better managers in baseball. He just doesn't have the talent he used to have that led the team to their 6 division titles in the first decade of the 2000s.
If they miss Joe Mauer this year, they do have Ryan Domit, who could slide over the catcher. He did catch for the Pirates, if you remember, and he is a good bat. Ben Revere, I mentioned, if anybody gets hurt, he's probably the first in line to play the outfield. The bench, Luke Hughes played a lot more than he probably should have last year, and Trevor Plouffe. So they do have guys that could fill in a pinch off the bench. And I think that we are selling the Twins a little bit short. I think that they will finish out of the cellar, and I think they could finish in 3rd or 4th place. I mean, the thing is everything has to go right in order for that to happen. And I'm just not sold on the White Sox or the Royals either. So, as you said, it's going to probably be a 3-team race in the American League Central for the 5th spot. And let's move on to a team that spent more money than their owner initially paid for it, and that's the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. They spent more money on 2 players this offseason than Artie Moreno paid for the team initially. He paid, I think, $150 million for the team back in 2003. They spent over $330 million on C.J. Wilson and Albert Pujols, and I want to hear your thoughts on what you think about the Angels' chances this year and about those 2 moves in particular.
Well, getting to those 2 moves in particular first, it was really shocking when Pujols went to the Angels. It seemed like he was getting fitted for his Miami Marlins jersey at one point. We'll get to them in a little bit. But no, he went to the Angels, jumped ship off the Cardinals, broke St. Louis fans' hearts. And then C.J. Wilson, we all heard he was probably going to want to pitch on the West Coast. I was not surprised that he went to the Angels. And those 2 moves, I mean, they are big moves. There's no doubt they are productive players in baseball. Pujols, I mean, he missed about 3 weeks last season. That's why his numbers were so low. But he still batted exactly, around 300, 299, 37 home runs, 99 RBIs. Those numbers should go up. Angel Stadium is not really a pitcher's park, and Pujols, I think, will have success there. C.J. Wilson, he loves pitching on the West Coast, clearly. He's always wanted to pitch for the Angels, and I think Wilson will do very well for Los Angeles. And overall, though, the Angels, in my opinion, I don't think of them. People who are picking them for the AL West to win the division, in my opinion, are a bit overrating them. Their lineup is not. There's a lot of players that you really can't count on. I look at guys like Eric Ibar, great speed guy, but when does he hit for average? Howie Kendrick got an extension, but really hasn't been that productive. Around a 250 hitter for most of his career. Kendry Morales is going to be the DH. He hasn't played in a couple seasons, or hasn't played a full season in a couple years. Torrey Hunter is aging. Really didn't have a solid year last year. Vernon Wells had a horrible year last year. I mean, you got to expect him to improve a little bit, but then you got Callaspo at third base, who could be replaced by Mark Trumbo once he figures out how to play third base. Chris Iannetta, Peter Bourjos. I mean, besides Pujols and, likely production out of Morales conceivably, I don't know about their lineup. Their pitching is still very solid, of course, but, enough about my thoughts. What are your thoughts on the Angels?
Well, one move I do like that the Angels made was that when they traded Tyler Chatwood to get Chris Iannetta. Chris Iannetta only hit .238 last year, but his on-base percentage was .370. So he's going to get on base. He can handle the pitching staff well. The Angels, they have age on their team. There's no doubt about it. Bobby Abreu is, I think, 37, 38 years old. Kendry Morales is coming off an injury. Torrey Hunter is getting up there in age. Vernon Wells still trying to live up to his huge contract. And there are holes there, and the bench is good. Mark Trumbo last year, remember, he almost won Rookie of the Year. He's coming off the bench. That shows you the depth they have. I don't like the number 1 and 2 in the lineup with Ibar and Howie Kendrick. I'm not sold on that. If Mike Trout comes up, that could change a few things. The bullpen, I'm not sold on either, with the exception of Hisanori Takahashi, Scott Downs, and Jordan Walden. 2 of those guys are lefties, and Downs and Takahashi. But Troy Hawkins has been inconsistent. Jason Isringhausen is pushing 40 years old. The rotation, I'm not sold on Irvin Santana staying healthy, and I don't think C.J. Wilson's going to have as productive of a season as everybody thinks he's going to be, because I think he's going to try to live up to his massive contract as well. There's going to be a ton of expectations on the Angels because they got Pujols and C.J. Wilson. I think they're going to be competitive, and they will compete with the Red Sox and the Cleveland Indians for the second wild card, among other ball clubs. But I'm just not sure if they will be able to overtake Boston. They might, but I think a lot has to go right for the Angels to make a run at the postseason.
Well, honestly, and I agree with their holes in the lineup and their bullpen, but their rotation is still very, very good. No matter how you put it, Weaver had an incredible year last year. Aside from Verlander, he could have been considered the Cy Young. Dan Herron, I guess you consider him Cy Young too. A solid number 2 starter. Irvin Santana pitched that no-hitter last season. He's kind of like an A.J. Burnett type of guy. I mean, he's not going to put a 5 ERA up, but he's going to be inconsistent at times.
They don't have depth in the rotation, though. I mean,
that's true.
Jerome Williams is supposed to be a projected starter. He hasn't pitched, I believe, in about 5 or 6 years in the big leagues, if I'm not mistaken. And the next in line would probably be Garrett Richards, who made his major league debut against the Yankees, got lit up. But after that, if Richards struggles and Jerome Williams doesn't pan out, who do you have? Because Joel Pinheiro is no longer with the ball club, and there's just not a lot of depth at the back end of the rotation, and the bullpen is a bit suspect.
That's true. That is true. But just to get my prediction out there, as we're about to hit the hour mark here, I think the Angels will be able to make the playoffs as the number 1 wild card. I think by a game or 2 over the Rays. I think the Angels, their pitching, I think if they stay healthy, and if they can, just be consistent enough, I think they'll be able to be right there at the end. And I don't see the Red Sox doing much, so that's why I don't see them being able to overtake the Angels. I think the Red Sox have more holes than the Angels, and the Angels, I think they will be around a 89-90 win team, and I think that'll be enough to push them over the top and get back into the playoffs.
And now let's move on to the Moneyball team, the Oakland A's. They've already began their season playing in Japan, splitting 2 games there. The Oakland A's, they made a lot of noise in the offseason. They traded away Trevor Cahill. Gio Gonzalez and Andrew Bailey got, in return, 10 young players, many of whom could be prospects. And they also decided to sign Yoenis Cespedes, and they gave Coco Crisp a 2-year, $14 million contract, as well as trading for Seth Smith from the Colorado Rockies. Lots of moves by Billy Beane, and I want to hear your thoughts on what do you think about the A's.
Well, yeah, this was very an interesting offseason for the A's indeed. As you said, trading away their 3 young, solid starters, I guess, in Gonzalez, Cahill, and Bailey, of course, was their closer. When I heard those moves, I mean, it sounded normal. It's what a team that rebuilding does. But then they go out and hand out $7 million a year to Coco Crisp, and then they sign out of nowhere Yoenis Cespedes to a $36 million contract. You know, the A's all of a sudden traded away pitchers who were under team control and not making a whole lot to bring in a couple guys who are going to be making more money than they should, and then trading for Seth Smith, which I think is an interesting deal. But it really makes no sense, in my opinion, the way they went about this. I mean, if they had Gonzalez, if they still had Cahill, they could have had a chance to be around a 500 team, but I really don't see it now that they traded away those guys. I don't think that's the way to do it, is trade away all your pitching to sign a couple of hitters.
There are rich teams, and there are poor teams. Then there's 50 feet of crap, and then there's us. That's the greatest way to explain the Oakland A's dilemma with their payroll right now. They will be 30th in revenue among all the Major League Ball clubs this season. Billy Beane was explaining it on Brandon Tierney's show on Oakland radio, and he was talking about basically the dilemma that they had. If they would have kept Cahill, Gio Gonzalez, and Andrew Bailey for another 2 years, what happens if they get injured? What happens if their production starts to sink? If you have an opportunity to get young talent now and to accumulate it and keep it as long as possible, why not do it now? And there's another factor that I think of with Yoenis Cespedes. He's off to a hot start now, albeit it's 2 games. What happens if he has 2 solid seasons for the Oakland A's? They do not get the stadium deal done with San Jose, and they still have the revenue issues, and Cespedes is due for a new contract within those 2 years, and Billy Beane obviously can't afford him with the A's. Do they trade him? What do they do in that situation, considering that that's the move that they want to make? Do they wait for the ballpark? And it's a never-ending cycle. And the rotation is not really that great. They did get Tom Malone as in that trade with the Nationals for Gio Gonzalez. Brett Anderson underwent Tommy John surgery last year, so he's going to come back in mid-season. Dallas Braden's on the disabled list. Manny Ramirez has to serve the 50-game suspension until he comes back on the roster. And there's just a lot of holes for the Oakland A's. I think they're going to finish in 4th place, and I'm just not really that sold on the Oakland A's doing anything much this season as far as competing is concerned.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think they'll finish 4th as well. A good amount back behind the other 3 teams. The A's, as you said, it really is a never-ending cycle. I mean, this is like the 3rd or 4th time they've tried to rebuild or something like that, and since 2006 when they made the playoffs, and it just hasn't worked out. They made some interesting moves, albeit questionable moves. They are interesting, in bringing in Cespedes, who is an exciting player to watch. He'll bring some more fans to the seats. Seth Smith coming in from the Rockies. Bartolo Colon signing on with the A's, pitched actually incredible against the Mariners in that second game in Japan, albeit against a weak Mariners offense, which we'll get to in just a couple moments. But the A's do they do have a couple of nice players, but ultimately what they did here is another rebuilding method, and I don't think it'll be successful. And this immediate season, I do have them finishing 4th. And so now on to the Seattle Mariners. We'll cover them quickly. Well, not too quickly. But, Seattle coming off another dismal season. They lacked offense, had, of course, that, 21-game losing streak, I think. It was funny because I remember they were around.
Going into the Yankee series, it was about 17 or 18. They were challenging for the Major League record. I think it was 19 because the Major League record 21 set by the Orioles in '88 under Frank Robinson.
Yeah. So I mean, the Mariners had a very, very horrible and forgetful season, and to address their offense, they made a huge move. Of course, we talked about it already. Of course, acquiring Jesus Montero and Hector Noesi from the Yankees for Michael Pineda and Jose Campos. Montero is going to slide in as their fifth hitter and the DH, and will catch every other game or so. The Mariners, that'll definitely be an improvement to the lineup. They also slid Ichiro down in the number 3 spot, giving Sean Figueroa an opportunity to lead off. They have Dustin Ackley, who had a big first game in Japan. Justin Smoke still hasn't really found his stroke yet, as I rhymed there, but they have good pieces. They have Felix Hernandez, Jason Vargas, Hector Noesi, who's going to start for them too, going to be their number 4 starter. They have a lot of good pieces, and I keep repeating myself for many teams, but they aren't going to contend, but they are a team to look at for future competition.
The Seattle Mariners, they have a decent rotation. Hernandez, Vargas, Blake Beavan, Noesi, Millwood. The thing that there was never the pitching that was the problem. The problem with the Mariners the last 2 years is they had one of the most anemic offenses in baseball history the last 2 years. I know it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but if you look at the stats, it will back it up. This year they improved it. Dustin Ackley is going to be there for a full season. Ichiro sliding over to the number 3 hole and might hit for more power. Justin Smoke you have in the number 4 slot. Jesus Montero as the DH. I really think that he could develop into this generation's Edgar Martinez as the DH. They hope to get Franklin Gutierrez back. He's right now on the disabled list because of a partial tear in a pectoral muscle. Mike Hart was placed on the disabled list with sprained right shoulder. So it's questionable what the Mariners could do if they can stay competitive and stay in the race. I doubt it. I think that they're going to finish, I would say, probably 3rd in the American League West. Let's get to the team that I think we both think is one of the best in all of baseball, and we'll finish 1st in the American League West, and that's the Texas Rangers.
Yeah, the Texas Rangers, of course, the back-to-back American League champions, both times denied of their first World Series title in 2010 by the Giants, and then in 2011 by the wild card champion St. Louis Cardinals. Rangers really did make a slew of moves to really improve the team. And, of course, I mean, you can't really blame them. They still have arguably the best team in the American League, managed by Ron Washington. He got an extension recently. They have, the same young core players still here. Kinsler, Josh Hamilton. He's not young, but he's still very talented. Michael Young, the veteran. Nelson Cruz, Mike Napoli. Their starting rotation is now going to be number 1, Kobe Lewis. Derek Holland, number 2, had a great postseason. Matt Harrison, another lefty. And, of course, Yu Darvish coming over from Japan. Just struck out 11 Rockies last night. And then number 5 will be Neftali Feliz, making the transition to the rotation. And they can now do that because they signed Joe Nathan to be their new closer.
You can't go wrong with a team that went to the World Series 2 years in a row. The Texas Rangers did not have to make a lot of moves, and the bullpen is strengthened now that they moved Alexio Gondo into it. I think that he could actually become the closer over Joe Nathan, or Mike Adams could. I like the bullpen on this team. There's always a question with Josh Hamilton. They moved him to left field to protect with his health, but we know about his off-the-field stuff. Johnny Narin, who is watching him, basically as his roommate and as his advisor to make sure he stays out of trouble, is no longer with the ball club. You have Beltre, Young, Nelson Cruz. The rest of the lineup is solid. There isn't a lot of questions with it. The only question is the back end of the rotation with Yu Darvish and Neftali Feliz. How will Feliz make the transition to becoming a starter? But the Rangers have been able to show that they can do that. They did it with Alexio Gondo last year, who most of the season was in the rotation and looked solid. They had it with C.J. Wilson 2 years ago, and even last year. And I like the Texas Rangers to finish 1st in the American League West. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to get to the National League, and as we have time. And let's right now just go through our predictions. And For MVP, Cy Young, and Rookie of the Year, I have Robinson Cano as my American League MVP. I have my Cy Young Award in the American League as David Price, and my Rookie of the Year in the American League is Jesus Montero.
Those are some interesting picks. MVP, I can't give it Cano. I love the guy, but the baseball writers are not biased or unbiased towards the Yankees. I guess could say they will not pick a Yankee. I guess unless they put up Ruthian numbers. So I have Miguel Cabrera, one of the more consistent players in baseball of late. Cy Young, I do think it'll be a Yankee, and I think it'll be CC Sabathia. He has again been a very consistent player. I think he's lost the weight. He'll be able to maintain it and be productive for the Yankees all season. And then Rookie of the Year, I have to agree with you. It kills me to say this as he's now in the Mariners and not in Yankee pinstripes, but I think it'll be Jesus Montero winning Rookie of the Year. And so now let's head into the National League.
Well, first we do have a Baseball Night in America flash. Michael Pineda will begin the season on the disabled list after tests showed inflammation in his shoulder but no structural damage. An ownership group led by Magic Johnson has agreed to buy Los Angeles Dodgers for $2 billion. The Texas Rangers signed Derek Holland to a 5-year, $28.5 million extension to keep the Southpaw at the Metroplex through 2016. Cincinnati Reds closer Ryan Madson and Kansas City Royals all-star closer Joaquin Soria will both miss the entire 2012 campaign due to torn ligaments in their elbows, and Cardinals ace Chris Carpenter has been scratched from his opening day start due to a bulging disc in his neck. He will be placed on the 15-day disabled list, and Kyle Loesch will start the opener for the World Champs. And that is your Baseball Night in America flash. And we want to hear from you at 646-649-1921 or on Twitter, hashtag SportsDriveLive, or on our Facebook page as now we head towards the National League.
Yes, we do, and thanks for that Baseball Night in America flash, Gershon. Mm-hmm. And we'll head right now into the National League East and the Atlanta Braves. Again, aside from the Red Sox, had one of the worst collapses in baseball history. If that didn't happen in Boston, we'd all be looking at the Braves as the embarrassing team that choked last season. And they did have a pretty horrible September, as did the Red Sox. But, they, of course, are trying to rebound from that. From what I've heard, they're not looking back as the Red Sox are. They have a lot of interesting players, a lot of young players. Michael Bourne coming over from the Astros last season. Martin Prado, a productive third baseman. Brian McCann, I think, in my opinion, the best catcher in the National League. Dan Uggla, one of the best slugging second basemen in the National League. Freddie Freeman, Jason Hayward, Eric Hinsky, and Tyler Pasternicki rounds out that lineup. It's a very powerful lineup for a National League team. Jason Hayward can bounce back. Freddie Freeman had a solid rookie year. Their rotation is pretty good with Tommy Hanson, Jair Jurgens, Mike Minor, Brandon Beachy, and their number 5 starter will be Randall Delgado, who's Baseball America's number 3 prospect, or number 3 pitcher, I believe, or at least on their team.
And number 3 for the ball club as far as their prospects, I believe.
Oh, okay. So, the Braves, they have a very good team, and I think they're going to make some noise in the National League East this year, and potentially could overtake the Phillies if all goes right for them.
I think that they are the best team in the National League East, if not in the entire league. I really like this Atlanta ball club. Michael Bourne, you mentioned, starting this season, full season with the Braves. They haven't had that leadoff hitter for the last few years. Bourne was a great fit for them. Last season was exactly what the doctor ordered. Jason Hayward should be better. I think that he's going to be better. Had a tough sophomore year. Was messing around with his swing. A lot of things did not go the way he wanted. Dan Uggla should be more comfortable in the starting lineup. Remember, he had that 30-game hitting streak last year, with threatening the National League record for a hitting streak, and he should be more comfortable. You have Brian McCann. All these guys should be solid. The rotation is one of the best, if not the best in baseball. I think Tampa Bay's rotation is better than them, but I think they have the best rotation in the National League. They should be getting Tim Hudson back after the first month of the season due to back surgery. Now, that's going to be something to watch out for, but if not, we mentioned about Tommy Hanson. Jair Jurgens has to stay healthy. That's going to be the key with the Braves. They have to stay healthy. Chipper Jones is not going to be healthy to begin the season. He's going to have surgery to repair a torn meniscus as he begins his final season in Major League Baseball. And that's the same injury that Alex Rodriguez suffered, and we know that Rodriguez had trouble trying to bounce back from that injury. The bullpen is the best in baseball. Kimbrels, Venters, Chris Medlin, Eric O'Flaherty, Christian Martinez, Corey Guerin, and they added Levon Hernandez the other day. So I really like this Atlanta ball club. I look at them, and I think that they could overtake the Phillies and the Miami Marlins in the National League East.
And you know what? I somewhat agree with you. I don't know why I can't see them overtaking the Phillies. I mean, I could, but in my predictions, I don't. I have them finishing right behind them. But they are a very solid team, as you said. Great young rotation, and I'm using great because I think it does apply. Their bullpen is probably the best in baseball, as you said, and Kimbrel and Johnny Venters, the back end, Eric O'Flaherty. When Chipper Jones comes back, he can still produce, and it's kind of funny unfortunate, because he seemed to announce that he'd retire, and then I think almost the very next day he got injured. So that's I guess some sort of karma in some way. I don't know, but the Braves they are an interesting team, and they're going to be very good this year. I think they'll be able to bounce back, unlike the Red Sox, who I have missing the playoffs, of course. And I have them winning the number 1 wild card, right behind the Phillies, literally behind them, 1 game. I really don't, for some reason, I just can't see them winning the division. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened, but I think the Braves are just a game or 2 behind them, and I think the Braves will have a solid bounce-back season and will make it back into the playoffs for the second time in 3 years.
And now let's move on to Miami, the Miami Marlins. Here we go, Miami. New colors, new home, new team, new attitude, a new revenue stream, and even new names for a couple of their players. The Miami Marlins, they finally are having their new ballpark. First time that they have a new ballpark after 19 years of playing in South Florida, sharing a stadium with the Miami Dolphins. This year, they added Jose Reyes. They added Mark Burley. There's a new attitude with this team, a new swagger. And they're one of the most exciting teams, I think, in baseball. You're going to have Hanley Ramirez play third base. One of the guys with a new name is Giancarlo Stanton. That's actually the first name of Mike Stanton. He wants to use that. I guess when you have a new team with a new name and a new attitude, you want to change your name. For one guy, it's another case of mistaken identity in the bullpen with Juan Carlos Oviedo, or as he was better known as Leo Nunez. Juan Carlos Oviedo is actually his real name. And the rotation looks solid. You got Johnson, Burley, Ricky Nolasco, Anibal Sanchez, Carlos Zambrano, who is with the new manager Ozzie Guillen. And that's going to be interesting to see how those two are going to react. It's almost like two chemicals mixing. Lomo in that lineup. And I really like the Miami Marlins. I would not be surprised if they finish second. I have them pegged finishing third with the second wild card. But I really have high hopes for this Miami team.
Yeah, you can almost imagine Zambrano and Guillen throwing bases and Kool-Aid bottles at each other. But realistically, yeah, they are very improved from last year. Signing Jose Reyes, signing Mark Burley, signing Heath Bell to be their new closer. Their new uniforms, the new ballpark. It's an exciting team to watch, a very exciting team to watch. Tomorrow, of course, they'll play their first unofficial game at Marlins Park against the Yankees. That'll be at 1 p.m. But, the Marlins, they do have a lot of good players. Again, Reyes, Bonifacio, and Ramirez is probably the fastest 1 through 3 in the top of the lineup, as I think anyone has seen in the years. All of those guys could steal 25 bases plus. I don't know if Hanley Ramirez will get that opportunity, but Bonifacio and Reyes would have to be considered to get that. A lot of power with Hanley and Juan Carlos Stanton and Logan Morrison. Gabby Sanchez also has pop. Their rotation, Josh Johnson, how great was he before going down last season? Burley, a proven veteran, 200 innings, I think the last 10 straight seasons. Nolasco, Sanchez, Zambrano.
They got a good bench.
Their bench.
Hayes, Donnie Bleepin Murphy, Greg Dobbs, Chris Coughlin, Austin Kearns.
Yeah, there's no doubt. They have a very solid bench as well, and their bullpen, too, is pretty deep with Bell, Mujica, Dunn, Randy Choate, and the long guy, Chad Gardin, who somehow managed to come back to the major leagues after seemingly being cut by the Yankees a billion times. But the Marlins, at the end of the day, I can't drink their Kool-Aid. I really can't. I think they'll finish fourth, and I think I'll tell you who my third-place team is in a little bit. But,
I think I have a feeling. I think I have a strong feeling who it is, but let's meet the Mets.
Absolutely.
step right up, and I guess every other team in the National League East could beat the Mets in 2012 because they are my fifth-place team. The Mets just don't have a lot of depth right now. They traded away Angel Pagan to the San Francisco Giants to get Ramon Ramirez and Andres Torres. I don't see how Andres Torres is an upgrade over Angel Pagan. Many injuries that they've experienced in spring training. They will start the season on the disabled list with Pedro Beato, DJ Carrasco, and Tim Burdack. That's half their bullpen. But they do have John Roush, Ramon Ramirez, and Frank Francisco, all new guys added to the bullpen. The rotation, they do get Johan Santana back, but there's always questions with that. The rotation could be a strength with Santana, Dickey, Neese, Pelfrey, and G. I think that will be their strength, but the lineup is going to be questionable. They moved the fences in, so hopefully the offense will improve now for Jason Bay, David Wright, and some of the guys that have had trouble there. But I just don't see the Mets competing with the likes of Philadelphia, Washington, the Atlanta Braves, and the aforementioned Miami Marlins.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, Met fans, but they do not have it this year. I have them finishing fifth as well, which gives away my third pick for the Nationals. We'll get to them in a second. But the Mets, I mean, their pitching can be solid. Santana can bounce back. Dickey has been consistent the past 2 years. Neese, a very talented young left-handed pitcher. Pelfrey, I think, actually might be off the Mets by May. I heard he had a tirade the other day. He's not.
What happened?
Apparently, he. I don't know the whole story, but he got really upset and he was throwing his glove around the clubhouse and giving his best Kevin Brown impersonation with that
or AJ Burnett.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But, Pelfrey's a nutcase. I mean, I don't see him doing anything. Jeek had a good first half of the season, really tailed off towards the end. But the Mets, I mean, they're in a tough spot. They're going to finish last, in my opinion. I think they will. They just don't have the talent that Miami, Washington, Atlanta, or the Phillies have. And I just don't see it for them this year. Watch out for them to trade away possibly David Wright and maybe Johan Santana at the break. So let's now move on to the the Philadelphia Phillies, going in alphabetical order, move to the Philadelphia Phillies, of course managed by Charlie Manuel, the 5-time defending NL East champions, and I see no different finish here for them in 2012. It'll be a difficult thing for them to do without Chase Utley for the first part of the season and Ryan Howard being out probably into June. I think that can really derail them, and I think that'll deny them of a good amount of wins. Still have that solid rotation with Holiday, Lee, Hamels, Worley, and Blanton rounding it out. But there's still no doubt they have a talented team. They are getting up there in age, though. Jimmy Rollins, Placido Polanco, Victorino, I think, is around 30 now. Ty Wigginton, Carlos Ruiz. So, I mean, they are no longer the young Philadelphia team that was set up for so much success. And granted, they have had that. But the Philadelphia Phillies, I think, will have a tough time winning the NL East. But I think they'll be able to pull it out at the end once everyone else is back and healthy.
I disagree with that. I feel that this is the year that the ball finally drops on the Philadelphia Phillies. They will not win the National League East. The Philadelphia Phillies, I feel that they're finally getting older. I just think that age is going to catch up to them. Jimmy Rollins is not an effective leadoff hitter. Placido Polanco is up there in age. We mentioned about Victorino. Hunter Pence is probably one of their youngest regulars. John Mayberry is even older. I mean, he's in his late 20s. Has never really played full time. Had 15 home runs last year in a limited role as a starter. Should be an upgrade over Raul Ibanez. But when you miss Ryan Howard and Chase Utley, who are your two top hitters for any period of time, no pitching staff can recover from that. As well as the Phillies' rotation is with Halladay, Lee, Vance Worley, Cole Hamels, and Joe Blanton, it's going to be an uphill battle. They did get Jonathan Papelbon from the Boston Red Sox, who should help the bullpen as the closer, and that's a huge upgrade over Ryan Madson, no matter what Papelbon does, because Madson won't even pitch this year, as we mentioned in the Baseball Night in America update. The Philadelphia Phillies, I think, will finish second. They could even finish as low as third, in my opinion, but I do think that they will get the first wild card and they will win the playing game, just based on the fact that their pitching rotation is incredibly strong, and we are a little bit pressed for time now, so let's move on to the Washington Nationals.
Yeah, okay. and the Washington Nationals, in my opinion, are the third place team, in my opinion. And this might be a shocker to some people. I don't think it is to you. I have them winning the second wild card. I think the Braves win the first one, and the Nationals win the second. And I could see the Nationals winning the playing game. But anything can happen. But the Nationals had a very productive season considering their situation last season. Managed now by Davey Johnson as Jim Riggleman resigned mid-season because of a contract discrepancy. Nationals have a very, very solid and talented young team. Guys like Ian Desmond, Danny Espinoza, Ryan Zimmerman, who is very underrated, in my opinion, one of the best third basemen in baseball. Jason Worth can bounce back. Their rotation is very strong. I don't think you can deny that. Steven Strasburg, Gio Gonzalez, of course, coming over from the Athletics. Jordan Zimmerman, Edwin Jackson, who signed a one-year deal. When is he not signing those deals with the Nationals? And then John Lannon. And then their bullpen is also very young, but still very good. Their closer will now be Brad Lidge.
That's because Thorne's on the disabled list to begin the season with elbow soreness.
Yeah, he will come back, but for opening day, Brad Lidge will be the closer, and then he'll kind of slide into the setup role or mid-relief. Tyler Clippard, the former Yankee, has had great success. Good success in Washington. Sean Burnett, Ryan Mathieu, Tom Gorzelani. There are a lot of good players on this team, and I really, really like them to finally make the playoffs this season.
I will not disagree with that assessment. I just feel that the Phillies have more experience, and that's why I picked them as another wild card, and I like Miami's talent. I think they're a little bit more consistent. The question is, how fast can Ian Desmond and Danny Espinoza develop? If they could have breakout years, yeah, definitely could be their year. Ryan Zimmerman, I think, is one of the most underrated third basemen in the game. To echo your statement, I like that. Jason Worth, I think, could bounce back. The rotation is their strong point. Steven Strasburg has looked good in spring training. Gio Gonzalez will benefit from pitching in a weaker league. Jordan Zimmerman should be back from his injury woes. Edwin Jackson, we'll see what he could do. I remember when John Lannon was actually the ace of the Washington Nationals staff not too long ago. Mm-hmm. The Nationals, they could really win the second wild card or even win the first wild card. I have them pegged to finish fourth, but it's almost interchangeable with the way that the top four teams are in National League East. If this year it's a little bit more wide open, and it's basically the team that has the breaks go their way are going to probably win that division. And let's now move on to the Chicago Cubs as we plow through towards the National League Central. And the Chicago Cubs now the general manager is Theo Epstein. They're managed by Dale Swaim. And the Cubs are actually in a rebuilding mode. Jim Hendry now works for the Yankees. He was fired as a general manager. And it's a different look for the Chicago Cubs. The Cubs, for years, they were spending money on free agents, didn't go anywhere. Zambrano, they gave a huge contract to a couple of years back, as well as Alfonso Soriano and Ramos Ramirez. They're trying to rid the mistakes of the past, but you can't do that in one off season. I think it's going to be difficult for the Chicago Cubs to do anything this year. They have DeJesus. Darwin Barney had a good year. Starlin Castro is one of the best young shortstops in baseball. The rotation is Dempster, Garza, Jeff Samardzija, Chris Volstad, and the bullpen is going to be the back end with Kerry Wood and Carlos Marmol, but I don't see the Cubs finishing higher than fifth.
Actually, fifth place. Of course, this is the last season of it being a 6-team division. The Astros move to the American League next year. But, yeah, I have to agree with you. The Cubs are in that rebuilding mode. I saw them as players for Prince Fielder up in Pujols, but that never really went anywhere. I don't think they never really were in it at the end. But the Cubs, I think they'll finish fifth as well. Offense lackluster. I mean, they've got Brian LaHair, David DeJesus.
LaHair had a good year in AAA last year. He had over 30 home runs.
That is true. He can have a solid year in Chicago. But, I mean, besides that, Marlon Byrd is up there in age. Soriano, his contract's probably looking to get moved by the Cubs this season. I don't know who would take it, but the rotation, Dempster, Garza, Samardzija, Volstad, Mahalam, Volstad coming over from the Marlins for Zambrano. It's not a bad rotation, but, I mean, when you have that weak lineup and unproven bullpen, besides Kerry Wood and Carlos Marmol,
I wouldn't call the lineup weak. I think the lineup is decent, but I just don't see them going anywhere.
Yeah, I don't see it either. They're just a rebuilding team, and they'll probably finish fifth, well ahead of the Astros. But I don't think they'll do much. So I guess let's now move on to the Cincinnati Reds. Had a very interesting offseason this year. Of course, managed by Dusty Baker. Missed the playoffs last year after many people picked them to win the Central again. They did not do that. They fell short. The Brewers and the Cardinals finished ahead of them. They have a lot of familiar faces in Brandon Phillips, Joey Votto, Scott Rowland, Jay Bruce, Chris Heisey, Drew Stubbs. But they also acquired Matt Latos in a trade with the Padres. So he's now their number 2 starter. They got Bronson Arroyo back, Johnny Cueto going to be their number 1. They have a new closer in Sean Marshall, as Francisco Cordero went to the Jays. They have a very good team, and I think they'll finish around right behind the first place team, which we'll cover in a second. But the Reds, I think they have a good enough team to really, I think, fall just short of the playoffs. I really think it'll be a close race for the wild card spots. But the Reds, they have a talented team and can make some noise next year.
It would not shock me if this Cincinnati Reds team finishes in first place. I have them pegged for second. It will be interesting. We'll find out who both of us pick to finish in first place. But the lineup is good. Drew Stubbs is actually going to bat 7th this year. I think I mentioned earlier that he might bat 6th. Dusty Baker's toying with that idea. They're going to have him bat 7th because he struck out a lot over the last couple of years. But he's going to be more comfortable batting 7th. That dude BP, Brandon Phillips, will be leading off for the Cincinnati Reds this year. Scott Rowland, you have the veteran there. Joey Votto, one of the best first basemen, if not the best first baseman in baseball. Jay Bruce. I really like the catching, the combination at catcher with Ryan Hannigan and Devin Mesoraco. Mesoraco could actually become the starting catcher this year, maybe even have an impact the way Ryan LaVarnway, I expect, will have with the Boston Red Sox. Hannigan's another high on base guy. Pitching staff likes to throw to him. The rotation's really good. Johnny Cueto, I would say, is the most underrated pitcher in the National League. They got Matt Latos from the San Diego Padres, but they gave up a lot in that deal. Gave up a couple of prospects, also gave up Yonder Alonso, who had actually played left field for them at the end of last year. Bronson Arroyo is the veteran in that rotation. He's always been solid. Mike Leake is in his 3rd Major League season, and Homer Bailey. So that's a really good rotation. The bullpen, Chapman, Arredondo, and Sean Marshall coming over from the Cubs for Travis Wood will be the closer in place of Ryan Madsen, who's going to go on disabled list, has Tommy John surgery. We're not going to see him for another year and a half. So I like the Cincinnati Reds. It would not shock me for them to finish in first. I have them finishing second in the National League Central. And let's move on now to a team that I don't think anybody's picking to do anything this year, and that is the team that's going to play their final season in the National League in their 50th anniversary year, and that's the Houston Astros.
Yeah, and the Houston Astros, kind of the laughingstock of Major League Baseball currently. Of course, they're finally going to get that move to the American League West, which I think will benefit them. But, of course, it's 2012. This isn't about 2013 or 2014. This immediate season, the Astros are the worst team in baseball, in my opinion.
I have to agree with that assessment.
I think most people will. I think they'll finish in last place, probably around 90, 100 wins.
100 wins, they will make the playoffs, though.
100 losses, excuse me. Wow, John Sterling moment right there. Anyway.
And MLB The Show, they'll win 100 games.
Possibly if you rebuild them in franchise mode, but the Astros, they have just a bunch of no names really. I mean, Brian Bogusevich, excuse me. JD Martinez, Jose Altuve. I mean, exactly. I can't even pronounce these names. I know about the Astros. I'm sorry, Astro fans, if you're listening to this, but it's just a well-known fact. I think you need to accept it that the Astros aren't going anywhere this year. They're making Brett Myers their closer. They still have Wandy Rodriguez and Bud Norris. Carlos Lee is still hanging around, but honestly, this team, it's really hard to talk about them respectfully because they really aren't going to go anywhere this year.
Well, I'll try to do a little bit better with that you. I was able to pronounce some of the names at least on this team. The Astros did make some minor moves. They added Jordan Schaefer on last trade deadline when they got Michael Bourne. Jed Lowry they got from the Boston Red Sox in exchange for Mark Melancon. But the rest of the lineup, with the exception of El Caballo, Carlos Lee, most casual fans will not know who they are. Brian Bogusevich was actually the starting right fielder at the second half of last season. Chris Johnson was their starting third baseman most of the year. Jason Castro they've been expecting for a long time to become the starting catcher. Humberto Quintero is now with the Kansas City Royals, so it's actually his job to lose. They have Chris Snyder as a backup good guy off the bench, but their bench is not really that strong right now. The rotation, Wandy Rodriguez, they probably want to deal him. Bud Norris they have, who's a solid number 2. Jay Happ, Jordan Lyles are under team control for a while. The rotation's not horrible, but I don't see how they're not going to be the worst team in baseball this year. They just don't have the personnel on this ball club, and Jim Crane has now bought the ball club, and he is going to move the team to the American League. And if they couldn't compete in the National League, why would you think that they would be able to compete in the American League? And let's talk about a team that competed for the World Championship last year and nearly got to the World Series, and that's the Milwaukee Brewers. The Brewers, as we know, Prince Fielder is now going to make his residence in Detroit, Michigan, playing for the Tigers. But Matt Gamble is going to replace him at first base. But the rest of the Milwaukee Brewers should be intact. When Nyjer Morgan, Ricky Weeks, or Ramos Ramirez comes over from the Chicago Cubs, Ryan Braun, who will not serve a 50-game suspension for performance-enhancing drugs, will be the left fielder, whether fans like it or not. The starting rotation, Gallardo, Greinke, Wolf, Sean Markham, and Chris Narveson only missed 5 starts last year, one of the most stable rotations in all of baseball. And the Milwaukee Brewers, even though they didn't make a lot of moves, I don't think that they will finish in first place this year. I think they're going to finish in third place because losing Prince Fielder is a damaging blow. And I'm not convinced that Aramis Ramirez could hit 300 again, and it's a different dynamic, I believe, for the Milwaukee Brewers.
Yeah, the Brewers, I agree completely. I think they'll finish third place. When you lose Prince Fielder, that's a ton of production. Of course, Ryan Braun won't have to serve that 50-game suspension. That's of course a plus. But the Brewers, without Fielder, with Matt Gamble being the first baseman, Alex Gonzalez, Jonathan Lucroy, I don't know how much production you can expect out of the bottom half of the lineup. The rotation is still solid, as you said, very, very stable. Gallardo will be good again. Greinke should be solid. Wolf, Markham, of course, had his ups and downs. And the bullpen, of course, John Axford, Francisco Rodriguez, Jose Veras, the former Yankee, Carmen Lowe, Manny Parra. There's some interesting players.
I'm not convinced about the bullpen, though. Aside from John Axford, Francisco Rodriguez, we've seen with the Mets how inconsistent he can be. Jose Veras is also kind of hot and cold. I remember how he was with the Yankees and also with Pittsburgh. He was hot and cold.
Mm-hmm.
And so even with the rotation being solid, I just don't know how this bullpen could hold leads, and the lineup is not as dynamic as it was last year. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, I agree completely. And a third-place finish, I think, is respectable for them. I think they'll take that, losing their franchise player, or arguably, if it isn't Braun already. I think the Brewers will finish well above 500, probably around 85, 86 wins. But now let's move on to the team.
But Brian, would you take it if you were in the National League Championship Series last year, 1 game away from the World Series? I don't think you'll take a third-place finish.
Well, you won't take it per se, but when you lose a player like that, like Prince Fielder, I think I'm just saying if you're a realistic fan, I think if you're a Brewers fan, you would understand them finishing third. And anyway, so let's move on to the Pittsburgh Pirates as we're kind of crunched on time here. And yeah, the Pirates made an interesting move with the New York Yankees back in February, acquiring A.J. Burnett from the Yankees in exchange for a couple low prospects. And then immediately on March 2nd, he fouled a ball off of his eye during batting practice, and he's going to be out 8 to 12 weeks with a fractured orbital bone. But anyway, I know that was really tough to watch, even being a Yankee fan who wanted his head at the end of the regular season. of course, had some great moments for the Yankees in the postseason. But anyway, the lineup, is pretty interesting. Alex Presley's going to lead off. Jose Tabata, the former Yankee farmhand, Andrew McCutchen, Neil Walker, Garrett Jones, Rod Barajas coming over from the Dodgers, Pedro Alvarez, Clint Barmas. They're a good team. I mean, I don't think they'll be able to overtake the Brewers or the Reds or the Cardinals in the division, but the Pirates, I think they'll finish. They'll hover around 500 once AJ Burnett gets back. He could produce for them. Eric Bedard, Jeff Carstens, James McDonald. There are a lot of good players, and it wouldn't shock me the least bit if they're in the running for a wild card spot towards the end of the year.
Pittsburgh Pirates, they have good balance. The rotation, getting Eric Bedard, I think, was an excellent move by the Pittsburgh Pirates. What Bedard brings is he hasn't had an ERA lower than 4. The problem is he hasn't been able to stay healthy, but we've seen in the American League the talent that he has when he is healthy, and when he goes to a weaker league, and now he pitches in PNC Park, which is a great pitcher's park. That's a great fit for him. Jeff Carstens really succeeded there last year in his first full year as a starting pitcher. McDonald, Kevin Correa. It's going to be Brad Lincoln beginning the year as probably the fifth starter until A.J. Burnett comes back, and I think A.J. Burnett's going to do better with less pressure on him in Pittsburgh when that city is more of a football and a hockey town, especially now with the Pittsburgh Penguins competing for the postseason in hockey. But now getting back to baseball, Alex Presley's in left field. We mentioned about Jose Tabata, Andrew McCutchen. That's a good outfield. They got Nate McLouth back off the bench. The only negative that I have here is the bottom half of the order. I don't know how much production you're going to get out of there. I think Rod Barajas should probably be on the bench. Michael McHenry is a better defensive catcher, and I think he'll be better calling games. We've seen Barajas will get hot early in the year and then cool off considerably. That happened a couple of years ago with the Mets, if you remember. Pedro Alvarez, they're still waiting for him to develop. When is he going to become the player that the Pirates thought that they drafted a couple of years ago? Still hasn't happened yet. So there are some questions with the Pirates, but the bullpen looks okay with Joel Hanrahan and Evan Meek and Jason Grilli. I just don't know if they'll be able to win on a consistent basis enough. I think you're right. They're going to be able to hover around 500, but I don't know if they're going to do much more than that. That's best case scenario, and hopefully they will be around 500 this year because that would finally break the streak of 20 consecutive losing seasons.
Wow.
Have not made the playoffs since 1992. But now let's move on to a team that won it all last year, and that is the team that both of us, no surprise, are picking as the top team in the National League Central despite the loss of perhaps the best player in baseball, and that is your St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah, and now managed, surprisingly, by Mike Matheny, the former backup catcher for the Cardinals. Tony La Russa stepping down after the World Series ended, in which the Cardinals won in 7 games, an exciting World Series. I'm sure many St. Louis fans are still coping with the loss of Albert Pujols, but they are the defending world champions, and I really think they are going to be a solid team. A lot of people have underestimated them since losing Pujols, but I really don't think they'll give a beat. In fact, I think they'll finish even better than they did last year. Well, of course, in saying
I can't see them finishing better.
Well, winning the division, I mean, regular season wise, I think the Cardinals win more games than last year. I mean, they still have a solid lineup, and Beltran signing with the Cardinals, Matt Holliday, Lance Berkman going to be the first baseman, so he'll have less work to do fielding wise, less running as he was in the outfield last season. David Freese, World Series MVP. I think if he stays healthy, he can be a very solid player. Eventually could become in the running for MVP. I really like him. Yadier Molina getting that extension during spring training, which made some Yankee fans think of how much money Russell Martin might want. But that's another story for another day. The rotation is, of course, Chris Carpenter will be out indefinitely, so we don't know how much time he'll miss. But when he comes back, he'll still be very productive. Kyle Loesch, Jaime Garcia, Adam Wainwright coming off Tommy John surgery. He will be back this season. I think he's looked great in spring training. He's looked really great, and I think I can say that, and it makes sense. He really has looked fantastic. And then you got Jake Westbrook and Lance Lynn temporarily as the fifth starter. And their bullpen, is not unsurprising from last season. Of course, they lost Darren Oliver, but no, Darren Oliver
was with the Texas Rangers.
Yeah, I was just
they
thinking.
Lost Rhodes.
Yeah, that was it. They're two similar pitchers, both veteran very old veterans, but you got Jason Mott, Fernando Salas, Mark Zepchinski, Kyle McClellan, J.C. Romero. They have a very balanced team. I think that's the right way to put it. Nice bench too. They have a balanced team, and I think the Cardinals will be able to avenge the loss of Albert Pujols and make it back into the playoffs, and this time as the division champions.
I think in some areas they could go either way. I think they could finish either first or second place. I have them finishing first. I really like the move with Carlos Beltran that they made at the trade deadline, knowing the uncertainty of whether Albert Pujols would re-sign or not, and it gives a good balance in the outfield with Beltran, Jay, and Holiday. Lance Berkman moving in the first base. He's played first base before in Houston. And also with the Yankees, he filled in for Mark Teixeira a couple of times at first. He was really solid coming back to the National League, being comfortable in that lineup. The question is, can guys like David Freese stay healthy? Can Tyler Green be able to play second base on a consistent basis? Rafael Furcal is moving from the leadoff spot to the 8th spot. That's going to be interesting to see how that works out. The bench is a bit inexperienced. Tony Cruz is going to be the backup catcher ahead of Gerald Laird. That should be an upgrade after I basically ripped Gerald Laird when I was looking at the Detroit Tigers earlier. Matt Carpenter, you have at third base, Daniel Descalso, Shane Robinson. It's a bit of an inexperienced bench. The rotation question is, how long is Chris Carpenter going to be out? But the thing is, you're basically replacing Adam Wainwright with replacing Chris Carpenter. With Adam Wainwright, because remember the Cardinals, they had an entire season without Adam Wainwright, and they won the World Series last year. That's something that you have to remember. Loesch is going to be the opening day starter. Jaime Garcia, Adam Wainwright, who is one of the best pitchers in baseball, Jake Westbrook, who is starting to become more comfortable in St. Louis and with the National League. The bullpen remains intact. Jason Mott only had 9 saves last year because he wasn't the closer most of the season. Became the closer late in the year. And Scott Linebrick is the only new addition coming over from the Atlanta Braves, who the Cardinals were able to overtake after 162 games, after it was all said and done, and become the world champions. And now let's take a trip west, and in particular to Arizona, where we look at the National League West champions from a year ago, the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Yeah, the Arizona Diamondbacks had a great season last year, considering their standards. Shocked everyone, made the playoffs. I think it was about a 26-game difference improvement. They went from the cellar of the division to the top. Diamondbacks winning the division, making it back to the playoffs, and ultimately being ousted by the Milwaukee Brewers in the NLDS. They have a lot of returning players like Aaron Hill, Justin Upton, Miguel Montero, Chris Young. They signed Jason Kubel, Paul Goldschmidt, who made some noise in the postseason. He'll be their starting first baseman this year. Their rotation, arguably a Cy Young candidate last year, Ian Kennedy, Daniel Hudson, Josh Clementer, Trevor Cahill coming over from the A's. Their bullpen, similar from last year. J.J. Putz will be their closer. Takashi Saito coming over. Joe Patterson, Brad Ziegler, and Craig Breslow, both former Athletics. They have a lot of good pieces, and I think they will have a good season, but I don't think they'll win the division again.
I think they're going to finish second, and the reason why is the Arizona Diamondbacks, their top 5 starters, they pitched the most innings in all of baseball last year, albeit Trevor Cahill was not in the rotation with them. He was with Oakland. But Arizona Diamondbacks, they had the most innings of any team, and I don't know if the young starters like Kennedy, Cahill, Daniel Hudson, Cahill threw over 200 innings with Oakland, just take that in mind. Josh Clementer in his second Major League season, can they do that again? That's the question. Ian Patrick Kennedy looked great last year, over 20 wins. Could have been a choice for the Cy Young if it wasn't for that great left-hander in Los Angeles, Clayton Kershaw. Stephen Drew is going to miss half the season recovering from a fractured ankle. He's going to questionable for opening day. I don't mean if he's going to miss half the season, but he's going to miss time. And so Willie Bloomquist is going to be the leadoff hitter. And last year he missed half the season, Stephen Drew, And Willie Bloomquist is going to be the leadoff hitter, and you have Aaron Hill batting second. I'm not convinced about Willie Bloomquist batting in the leadoff spot. That's a question. I really like Justin Upton. I think he's going to have a monster year this year. Chris Young, you never know what you're going to get from him. You have Miguel Montero. Will pitchers figure out Paul Goldschmidt? That's going to be a question. I have the Arizona Diamondbacks finishing second, and we only got 11 minutes, believe it or not. Time flies when you're having fun here in this show on Baseball Night in America. So let's move on to a team with lower expectations. We were talking about this team before we got on tonight, and that is the Colorado Rockies. The Rockies, we both like their starting lineup with Fowler, Scudero coming over from the Red Sox, and Cargo, Troy Tulowitzki, Todd Helton, Kadire, and company. The rotation we weren't thrilled about, especially the idea that a 49-year-old Jamie Moyer, yes, has made the rotation. How many 49-year-olds can even move their arms, can even throw a baseball at this point? I mean, it's just incredible that Jamie Moyer is even still pitching. And Jeremy Guthrie is the ace of the staff. And we know if you have Jeremy Guthrie as the ace of the staff, you're usually not going to be going anywhere. And I think the Rockies could challenge for being one of the worst teams in the National League. I have them actually finishing 5th in the National League West.
That's an interesting pick. And as you said, yeah, we kind of consider them the AARP Rockies with guys like Jason Giambi, J.B. Moyer, and Todd Helton still on the team. But I think they'll finish 4th. I don't know about the Padres. I think the Rockies, as we both agree, they have a good lineup, but their pitching just simply is not there. And neither is their bench really. Their bench isn't horrible, but the Rockies just clearly aren't going to be contending this year, and they'll probably finish somewhere around 500, probably a couple games under. So let's move quickly now, because we're sorry if we're skipping over any of your favorite teams, but we got to get this in. Move on to the Los Angeles Dodgers, who were recently purchased by Magic Johnson, a group headed by Magic Johnson, and they have managed now by Don Mattingly in his second full season as a manager. They have D. Gordon going to be leading it off, speed guy. They brought in Mark Ellis, Matt Kemp, arguably the MVP last year, lost out to Ryan Braun. I thought he was the MVP last year. Ethier, Juan Rivera, their rotation, Clayton Kershaw, the Cy Young, Billingsley, Capuano, Harang. Their bullpen is solid. I like the Dodgers to bounce back this year and finish above 500. Mattingly was really doing a great job managing the team towards the end of the year. They really made a run last year, if you can remember.
Well, the wild card in this is now that the group headed by Magic Johnson, as you mentioned, has bought the LA Dodgers. That puts them in position to actually spend money and make a move around the trade deadline. They didn't have that luxury last few years to spend any money because of the whole situation with the McCourt's divorce. Now you're going to have D. Gordon lead off. That's going to be a question if he's going to be able to handle the leadoff spot. Not a very selective hitter. I could see Mark Ellis becoming the leadoff hitter when it's all said and done. Matt Kemp, I think he should have won the MVP last year. Nothing against Ryan Braun or any of the off-the-field stuff that he's been dealing with this offseason. I just feel that in this lineup, it's harder to hit in Dodger Stadium, and there's less protection in the lineup for Matt Kemp. Ethier did not have as strong of a year. A.J. Ellis, I think, could really be good as a catcher and could really surprise some people. You have Clayton Kershaw, Chad Billingsley. Solid 1-2. I think Billingsley is going to be able to be back to that ace that he once was, or close to it in this rotation as a 1A, I guess. Chris Capuano pitched really well with the New York Mets. Their bullpen is good with Javi Guerra establishing himself as the closer. The setup guy is Kenley Jansen. And I think the Dodgers will finish 3rd in the National League West. They might even, you never know if they could finish higher. I doubt it. But I think they're going to surprise some people. And now let's move on to a team in San Diego. The San Diego Padres getting new uniforms this year. It's going to be a different look for the Padres in some aspects. And I would like to hear your thoughts on San Diego.
Yeah, and San Diego is, as you said, another team with a new look. Made a lot of interesting moves this offseason. Of course, acquiring Carlos Quentin, who now will be out 4 weeks from March 17th due to arthroscopic knee surgery. But Yonder Alonso is now going to be the starting first baseman. He's Baseball America's #1 prospect on their team. Cameron Maybin will be leading it off. Orlando Hudson, a solid veteran. Chase Headley, who had a nice year last year, could be up for bigger things this year. Jesus Guzman will be the cleanup hitter. Their bench has some interesting players like Mark Kotze and Kristen Orfia. Their rotation, Tim Stafford, Corey
Lupke, I guess.
Lepke, I guess. I don't know. Sorry about that. Yeah. Edinson Volquez, Clayton Richard, and the former Yankee Dustin Mosley. Their bullpen now is Houston Street, a nice addition in my opinion. Luke Gregerson will be setting up, as will Andrew Kashner coming over from the Cubs. Joe Thatcher, Ernesto Friary, Brad Brach, and Micah Owings. They have a lot of good players. But I for some reason I just can't see them meshing this immediate season.
I don't know if they're going to mesh, but remember this team, they won the division. They almost won the division 2 years ago. They lost to the Dodgers. They lost to the Giants late. We're talking about the Dodgers. They were on my mind, but they lost to the Giants late that season. But most of those players from that team that almost won the division are still on this ball club. And Maben is a good fit in center field. And you have Orlando Hudson. The rotation, Clayton Richard could really be the ace of the staff. I mean, right now he could be as a left-hander. And when Matt Lato's out, most of the time he was. Dustin Mosley, he seems like a replacement-level pitcher, but he's decent. He could give you innings. Edison Volquez is a good pickup after they traded away Matt Latos, who couldn't stay healthy for them. Yonder Alonso is a good fit at first base. Nick Hundley's been there the last few years. Jason Bartlett, Will Venable. The bench is good with Baker and Blanks and Marcotte and Chris Northia. I think the San Diego Padres will finish fourth. I think they're better than the Colorado Rockies. They have more depth in the pitching staff. And that's my pick. And last but not least, let's discuss a team that won the World Series 2 years ago and had trouble scoring runs last year, and that prevented them from winning the division. And I think that's the team that both of us picked to win the division and bounce back this year, the San Francisco Giants.
Yeah, and the Giants, of course, improving with their offense, acquiring Melky Cabrera and Angel Pagan. They have Pablo Sandoval, Buster Posey coming back. He'll be huge. He'll be cleaning up for them. Their rotation is still strong. Although they traded away Sanchez, they still have Lincecum, Bumgarner, Kane, and Barry Zito, who I remember a caller a couple of weeks ago said that he is going to have predicted a bounce-back season, so we'll see from him. Their bullpen, solid. Sergio Romo, Brian Wilson, one of my favorite pitchers in baseball. Jeremy Affeldt, Javier Lopez, Guillermo Boda. Yeah, thank you for that. I think their offense has improved enough, and their pitching is still very young and solid. I see a return to the playoffs for the Giants, certainly. I think they'll be at the top of the division by a couple games over the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers. And that's my take. I don't know if you want to give any thoughts real quick before we sign off.
Yeah, we still got about 4 minutes or so we have time to go through the awards and give, quick thoughts on the Giants. My quick thought on the Giants would be that I think that this year they made some subtle changes offensively. Now it's down to 3 minutes. Wow. So we got to get this in quick. They made some subtle changes offensively, replacing now with Angel Pagan, replacing Andres Torres. That's a big plus in the top of the lineup. He did well for the Mets. Melky Cabrera was a good pickup from the Royals to get some offense there in left field and also help out defensively. Got the Panda, Aubrey Huff, Nate Scherholtz. Brendan Crawford's going to be playing his first full season. Let's not forget about Brendan Belt. He was a top prospect for the Giants a year ago. He could be a starter for them. And speaking of starters, let's talk about the rotation quickly. You got Lincecum, Bumgarner, Matt Cain. Don't forget about Ryan Vogelsong. ERA under 3 last year. Can he do it again? In the National League West, with all big ballparks, why not? He's coming off a strained back, so that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt them a little bit. But he should be ready in time when the Giants need a fifth starter on the 15th. The bullpen, you got Fear the Beard with Brian Wilson, Sergio Romo, Santiago Casilla, Ryan Vogels. And you got Freddie Sanchez is coming off the disabled list probably sometime in April after shoulder surgery. My picks in National League East: Braves, Phillies, Miami, Washington, the Mets, St. Louis, Reds, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, Cubs, Houston, and San Francisco, Arizona, L.A., San Diego, Colorado, NL MVP Justin Upton, Cy Young, Roy Halladay, and the Rookie of the Year Tyler Pastornicki from Atlanta.
Yeah, and for me, I got Phillies, Braves, Nationals winning the 2 wild cards, Marlins and Mets, and then NL West, I got Giants, Diamondbacks, Dodgers, Padres, Rockies. NL Central, I got the Cardinals, Reds, Brewers, Pirates, Cubs, and Astros, as do you. And my MVP will be Matt Kemp. I think he'll get it this year. And our Cy Young, in my opinion, is Steven Strasburg. And my Rookie of the Year,
but it's too much to ask with Tommy John surgery.
I'm predicting a big season from him. And my Rookie of the Year will be Tyler Pastornicki. So with a minute left, I'm going to let you sign off here. I'm ready for opening day. It should be a great season. And Gershon, go ahead and wrap this thing up.
Well, baseball is back, baby. We're going to be back. Opening day is going to be baseball season on Wednesday night, and we want to hear from you. Tweet us, Facebook us, and we want to thank everyone for joining us on Baseball Night in America on Sports Drive Live. For Brian and the rest of our crew, Gershon checking out. Time to say goodbye. We will talk to you soon.